Humanity was tolerated, not respected. That was the truth Ambassador Elena Ramirez carried with her every single day she walked through the halls of Nexus Prime. And today, she carried it across the most powerful chamber in the known galaxy. The Galactic Council's chamber was built for one purpose: intimidation. Massive pillars of dark crystal stretched hundreds of meters toward a ceiling that shimmered like a frozen galaxy. Artificial constellations flickered above the delegates, carefully designed to remind every species present exactly how small they truly were. Elena walked slowly across the polished floor. Every step echoed, not because the chamber was empty, because everyone had stopped talking. Thousands of alien eyes followed her across the hall. Some were glowing orbs floating inside clouds of soft light. Some were metallic lenses embedded in machine bodies that had existed longer than human civilization. Some were insectoid clusters of dozens of tiny black pupils that moved independently. Almost all of them held the same expression: amusement. Elena had learned not to react to that expression. She had learned a great many things in her 3 years as Earth's ambassador. At the far end of the chamber stood the council platform, a circular stage where the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy gathered to decide the fate of entire star systems. The great empires sat closest to the center. The ancient civilizations surrounded them. Even the newly admitted species had better placement than humanity. Elena reached the small table marked Earth Delegation. It was positioned at the very back of the hall. The message had never been subtle. She placed her datapad quietly on the table and sat down. For a moment, she looked at the chamber around her, the towering delegates, the shimmering ceiling, the perfect architecture of galactic power, and she thought the same thing she had thought on her very first day here. They have no idea. Then the session began. The towering figure of High Admiral Varkesh of the Corthan Dominion rose from the central platform. The alien was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick armored plates that shifted like living metal. For powerful arms rested across his chest while a pair of burning orange eyes scanned the chamber slowly. The gaze of a being who had commanded fleets for longer than most human nations had existed. When he spoke, his voice vibrated through the floor itself. Let us continue the matter of human territorial claims in Sector 91. A holographic star map appeared above the chamber. 17 small human colony worlds blinked into existence. Compared to the massive empires surrounding them, they looked like sparks floating in an ocean of fire. Tiny lights in a vast dark territory claimed by civilizations 10,000 years older than humanity's first city. Varkesh turned slowly toward Elena. His burning eyes found hers across the length of the hall. "Ambassador Ramirez," he said, "you claim these worlds belong to your species." Elena stood. "They do." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the chamber like a wave. The Admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your species achieved faster than light travel. What? 2 centuries ago?" 212 years, Elena replied. Calmly. "Precisely." Another wave of laughter followed. From the crystalline delegates who pulsed with cold blue light. From the insectoid swarms whose clicking wings betrayed their amusement. Even from the machine representatives who technically had no capacity for humor, but had apparently developed the cultural habit anyway. Varkesh spread his massive arms wide. "The Corthan Dominion has ruled the stars for 12,000 years. He gestured toward the small, glowing human colonies on the map. And yet this young species believes it has the right to control 17 habitable worlds. The laughter grew louder. Elena did not react. Not with her face. Not with her posture. Not with her eyes. The Admiral leaned forward slightly. His voice lowered. Not softer, but more deliberate. The voice of someone about to say something that was already decided. "You have built farms and mining stations on these planets. You call them colonies. But let us be honest." His eyes burned brighter. "These worlds are being wasted under human control." The chamber went quiet again. Every delegate present knew what was coming. Varkesh turned back toward the council. "The Dominion therefore proposes a territorial correction." The holographic map shifted. The 17 human colonies turned red. "These systems will be transferred to Corthan administration, effective immediately upon council approval." Gasps moved through several of the smaller delegations. One of the newly admitted species representatives, a being of translucent green light, flickered in obvious distress. They understood what the numbers meant even if the great empires did not feel them. 40 million humans lived on those worlds. Cities, schools, hospitals, children who had been born under alien suns and had never once seen Earth. Entire generations whose only home was a frontier colony world that a 12,000-year-old empire had just colored red on a map. Elena spoke carefully. You are proposing the forced relocation of 40 million people. Varkash shrugged one of his armored shoulders, a gesture of such casual indifference that it momentarily cracked Elena's composure. Just for a fraction of a second. Just enough to feel it. They may relocate to one of your core worlds. A tall crystalline entity spoke from across the chamber, its voice a harmonic chord of 3 tones speaking simultaneously. The human species lacks the infrastructure to properly utilize these systems. Another delegate added its voice. The Dominion will develop them far more efficiently. And another. In truth, the humans should be grateful. Those worlds will receive proper investment for the first time. Soft laughter spread through the chamber again. Elena looked slowly around the room. No one defended Earth. Not one delegate. Not one civilization. Not even the species smaller than humanity. The ones who might have expected solidarity. She had known this might happen. Humanity was new. Young. Small. The galactic community had seen dozens of young civilizations arrive full of ambition. Most of them learned quickly where they stood. The Admiral's voice thundered across the chamber once more. The Council will grant humanity 30 standard days to withdraw peacefully. His glowing eyes locked onto Elena's. After that, a pause that lasted exactly long enough to be insulting. The Dominion fleet will handle the matter. Silence filled the chamber. 30 days. 30 days to abandon 17 worlds. 40 million people. Generations of work. Entire planetary civilizations built grain by grain, city block by city block, child by child. Gone. Elena slowly folded her hands behind her back. She thought of New Carthage, the golden fields stretching across continents under 2 distant suns. She thought of Helios Station, the industrial colony where her own niece had been born 4 years ago. She thought of all 17 worlds she had visited, all the people she had promised, without ever saying the words out loud, that they would be protected. Her face showed no anger, no fear, just calm. She looked directly at the towering alien admiral. Then she spoke 4 quiet words. Thank you for the warning. The chamber erupted, not into concern, not into silence, into laughter. Full, genuine, galaxy-wide laughter from hundreds of alien species who had just watched a young civilization's only representative respond to an ultimatum with 4 quiet words of polite acknowledgement. The aliens believed the meeting was over, that humanity had already accepted its fate, that the small human ambassador would go home, make her calls, give her speeches, shed whatever tears her biology allowed, and then begin packing. But as Elena sat back down at the small human table at the back of the room, she activated her communicator beneath the desk. Her fingers moved with practiced calm across the encrypted keypad. A coded message transmitted instantly across interstellar space. 3 simple words. Phase 1 begins. When the council session ended, the massive chamber slowly emptied. Delegates from hundreds of civilizations drifted toward the towering exit gates. Their conversations blended into a strange, layered orchestra of alien languages, some clicking, some humming, some producing sounds that had no human equivalent. Elena remained seated. It was a habit she had kept since her first week as ambassador. Leave last. Observe everything. Across the chamber, a cluster of powerful delegates had gathered around High Admiral Varkash. Even from a distance, she could catch pieces of their conversation. The humans actually thought they could keep 17 systems. One insectoid delegate clicked with obvious amusement. Its mandibles moved rhythmically as it spoke, the alien equivalent of chuckling. They expanded far too quickly, another replied. A floating machine construct, one of the ancient ones, its body a perfect sphere of dark metal covered in ancient circuitry, rotated slowly in the air as it spoke. Their civilization is structurally unstable. Their political leadership changes every few years. Species with such short institutional memory rarely survive long in galactic politics. Varkash gave a deep rumbling laugh. They are enthusiastic, the Admiral admitted. There was something in his tone that might have been respect, if he had directed it toward an equal. Coming from him, It sounded like a zookeeper complimenting a particularly energetic animal. But enthusiasm does not win wars, he continued. Another alien spoke. Human military capability remains primitive by any meaningful standard. Their largest warships are smaller than our light escort vessels. A holographic data comparison appeared between them, the kind of casual display that powerful beings used when they weren't even trying to intimidate anyone, just sharing facts among themselves. Elena could see it clearly from her table. The chart compared military forces across the Council. At the top, the Corthan Dominion. Thousands of warships, planetary siege weapons, carrier formations capable of deploying entire armies across star systems simultaneously. Below them, the other major powers. The Crystalline Collective, the Machine Synod, the Ethereal Alliance. All ancient civilizations, all with fleets numbering in the thousands. And at the very bottom of the chart, a single thin blue line. Official human fleet strength, 184 vessels. Most of them small. Many converted from civilian cargo ships. Several outdated patrol craft that other species had retired decades ago. A crystalline delegate pulsed with slow, cold light. Their weapon systems are also limited. Rail cannons, chemical missiles, basic plasma accelerators. Effective against undefended targets. Against a Dominion battle fleet, the delegate paused. The silence was dismissive, symbolic. The machine representative spoke again. Human strategic doctrine is also notably chaotic. Their commanders frequently deviate from centralized orders. In most organized fleets, that would be considered catastrophic failure. Varkesh tilted his massive head. Humans call it initiative. Another alien replied dryly. Or incompetence. More laughter from the group. None of them noticed Elena quietly watching from the far end of the chamber. Then, one of the insectoid diplomats tilted its head. Its cluster of black eyes shifted in a way that suggested something like discomfort. Still, it said carefully, they did advance remarkably fast. The group went quiet. Not long. Not dramatically. Just a brief, involuntary pause. It normally takes a species 2,000 years to develop stable faster than light travel. The delegate continued. Humans did it in less than 200. Another silence. That fact had always made the older civilizations uneasy in ways they preferred not to examine too closely. Rapid technological development was the signature of unpredictable species. And unpredictable species were the ones that occasionally rewrote history. The machine construct rotated slowly. Statistical projections show an 83% probability that human space will fragment within the next century regardless of any territorial corrections. Their expansion model is unsustainable. Varkesh waved one massive hand. Rapid growth does not equal maturity, he said, and the unease in the group dissolved as quickly as it had appeared. The humans are still children playing with starships. Their expansion will collapse eventually. We are simply accelerating the inevitable. Agreement spread through the group. Heads nodded. Energy fields pulsed in confirmation. From their perspective, the analysis was solid. Humanity had overreached. 17 colonies were too many for such a young species to hold against real power. When real power arrived, they would fold. Just like every young civilization before them. Elena had heard enough. She stood quietly and gathered her datapad. As she walked toward the exit, 2 junior delegates passed close by her. Young ones, species that had only joined the council within the last few centuries. One of them whispered, apparently forgetting that human hearing worked perfectly well. Do you think they'll actually resist? The other laughed softly. With what fleet? A brief pause. Perhaps they'll send a strongly worded protest. More laughter. They continued walking, already thinking about something else. Elena said nothing. She had nothing to say to them. Not yet. Outside the council chamber, the massive halls of Nexus Prime stretched endlessly in every direction. Alien diplomats floated past in clusters. Security drones traced their quiet paths along the walls. Through the transparent ceiling, she could see the endless movement of starships through the alien sky. Hundreds of vessels from hundreds of worlds, all flowing through the galactic capital like blood through a living system. For most species, this place was the center of everything. The seat of power. The place where history was decided. And today the council believed they had decided humanity's history. 30 days. 17 worlds. 40 million people. Elena stopped walking. For a long moment, She simply looked up through the transparent ceiling at the ships moving through space. So many ships, from so many civilizations, all of them ancient, all of them certain. Her communicator vibrated softly against her wrist. A reply from Earth. Encrypted. Short. Preparations underway. Elena allowed herself the smallest possible smile. The galaxy believed it understood humanity. It had studied humans carefully, cataloged their ships, analyzed their technology, measured their military output, observed their political chaos, and reached a reasonable conclusion based on all available evidence. The available evidence had been very carefully selected. For 50 years, human intelligence services had maintained one of the most disciplined deception operations in galactic history, letting alien eyes see exactly what humanity wanted them to see, building a reputation as enthusiastic but limited, ambitious but overextended, growing fast but not growing smart. The galaxy had believed it because they wanted to believe it. It was easier to dismiss humanity than to take them seriously. Elena resumed walking through the halls of Nexus Prime, because in 30 days, the galaxy was going to learn the difference between what humanity had shown them and what humanity actually was. 3 days after the council session, the Corthan Dominion made sure the entire galaxy watched. The broadcast arrived not quietly, not through diplomatic channels. It came as a full-spectrum fleet transmission across every major communication network in human space, the kind of broadcast reserved for unconditional surrenders and declarations of war. On Earth, it interrupted global networks mid-broadcast. In the 17 colony worlds, it appeared simultaneously on public screens in cities, in farms, in orbital stations, in deep space mining platforms. Even crews working in the dark outer edges of human territory received the signal. The image that appeared showed High Admiral Varkesh standing on the bridge of his flagship. Behind him stretched a massive observation window. And behind the window, warships, hundreds of them, their dark hulls gleaming like blades against the stars in a formation so precise it looked architectural. He spoke with the calm of a man announcing something that was already finished. Citizens of the Human Federation, 3 days ago, the Galactic Council issued a ruling regarding your occupation of 17 systems in Sector 91. The Corthan Dominion has been authorized to assume administration of these territories. The star map appeared beside him. 17 colonies in blue. Then slowly, one by one, they turned red. Human settlers currently occupying these worlds will be granted 30 standard days to evacuate. Transportation will be provided. A line of text appeared beneath the Admiral's image. Estimated population affected, 40,872,000. If evacuation is not completed within the allotted time. The holographic map changed again. A fleet icon moved toward the human colonies. 500 warships. The largest Dominion armada deployed in decades. An armada designed not to fight, but to make fighting unthinkable. Dominion forces will begin enforcement operations. The Admiral leaned slightly toward the camera. Your species has expanded too quickly. You lack the capability to defend such territory. Withdraw peacefully. Relocate your people. And the Dominion will consider this matter closed. His eyes hardened. But if you refuse, we will enforce the Council's ruling. The view behind him shifted. Every warship in the formation fired its engines simultaneously. Hundreds of ships glowing with coordinated power. The broadcast ended. Across human space, silence fell. On New Carthage, farmers gathered around public terminals in the fields. On Helios Station, workers watched the broadcast repeat in silence. On the outer colony worlds, the frontier ones, the youngest ones, the ones where entire communities had been built by hand over 2 generations. People looked at each other across dinner tables and asked the question no one wanted to answer. What do we do? Some were already packing. Some were furious. Some sat completely still, staring at nothing. But in a secure chamber deep beneath the United Earth Defense Command in Geneva, the atmosphere was entirely different. Admirals, scientists, political leaders, strategic analysts who had spent their entire careers preparing for exactly this moment. They watched the broadcast in silence. When it ended, no one spoke for several seconds. A general leaned forward slowly. 500 ships. Another officer nodded. Standard Dominion deployment doctrine. Overwhelming force to eliminate any rational calculation of resistance. Another silence settled over the room. The Secretary General of the Human Federation looked around the table. Then he turned toward the back of the room, toward a woman standing quietly near the wall. She wore no decorations, no medals. Her uniform carried only a single simple insignia that most of the people in this room had only learned about 6 months ago. Admiral Chun, he said. Your assessment. The woman stepped forward. Admiral Sarah Chun, 53 years old. 28 years of service in a branch of the military that did not officially exist. Her face was entirely still, not the stillness of someone suppressing emotion, but the deeper stillness of someone who had already processed every scenario in the room long before anyone else arrived. They are correct about one thing, she said. Our public fleet cannot defeat 500 Dominion warships in a conventional engagement. Several leaders shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Chun continued without pause. However, she tapped the control panel in front of her. A holographic star map filled the center of the room. The 17 human colonies lit up, familiar, expected. Then other things began appearing. Hidden installations deep inside asteroid fields. Unregistered shipyards operating behind the sensor profiles of civilian mining operations. Defense platforms buried inside rock and ice that had been there for years, waiting patiently. And then, fleets. Many fleets. Ships that existed in no database the Council had ever accessed. Several of the political leaders had never seen this map before. One of the senior ministers exhaled slowly. His hands were flat on the table. The Secretary General looked at Chun. How much time do we need? Chun studied the map for a moment. They gave us 30 days, she said. She looked around the room. That's more than enough. Far away, on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Elena Ramirez watched the same broadcast from her apartment window overlooking the alien city. The transmission ended. The stars outside continued their silent movement across the alien sky. Her communicator vibrated. Phase 2 authorized. Elena set the device down on the windowsill. 30 days. The Dominion believed humanity would spend those 30 days evacuating, packing, running, processing defeat the way young civilizations always did, with grief and resignation and the quiet acceptance of a universe that did not care about fairness. They were wrong. Humanity would spend those 30 days finishing what they had spent 50 years building. 10 days after the ultimatum, life across the 17 human colonies appeared almost normal. That was exactly the point. On New Carthage, farmer Daniel Ionescu drove his harvesting machine through endless rows of golden grain under the light of 2 distant suns. The warm wind moved through the crops. From orbit, the colony looked peaceful, quiet, a world going about its business, perhaps in denial, perhaps in slow-moving grief, but not in preparation for anything dramatic. Daniel parked the harvester beside an old storage barn and checked his wrist communicator. A message had arrived. It was formatted as a routine agricultural update. Harvest schedule adjustment. Seasonal variance detected. Initiate early harvest procedures. Daniel read it once. He had been waiting 12 years for that message. He walked toward the barn and pressed his palm flat against a section of the weathered wooden wall. The surface scanned his biometrics. Then the wall slid open, not the way a door opens, but the way a false surface reveals what it was always hiding. Behind it was not a barn. Beneath the farm, beneath the golden fields and the peaceful sky and the normal life Daniel had spent 12 years carefully constructing, was a reinforced underground chamber. Weapon racks lined the walls. Military-grade armor. Heavy plasma rifles. Tactical drone canisters. Equipment that had been sitting untouched for over a decade, maintained with the same quiet discipline that a soldier applies to everything they care about. Daniel opened a storage locker and looked at what was folded inside. A combat uniform. He ran one hand slowly across the fabric. He had worn it for the last time on the day he planted his first field. He had made himself a promise then, that he would only wear it again if it was absolutely necessary. Today it was absolutely necessary. Before becoming a farmer, Daniel Ionescu had been Captain Ionescu, Earth Defense Special Forces, a man who had spent 15 years learning how to take things apart. Systems, defenses, assumptions about what was possible. He wasn't the only one. Across New Carthage, thousands of farmers were receiving the same message at the same moment. Every one of them understanding it completely. Every one of them opening their own doors, their own lockers, their own carefully maintained pieces of a life they had set aside but never surrendered. The harvest had begun. Thousands of light years away, on the industrial colony New Birmingham, a different message arrived, and a different kind of transformation began. Factory Supervisor Maria Alvarez walked through her assembly floor as the message hit her terminal. She read it without slowing her pace. Around her, production lines were already stopping, machines powering down, workers checking their communicators with expressions that were calm in a way that would have seemed strange to anyone who didn't know what was underneath that calm. Maria stepped into the secure control room and entered a code she had memorized on her first day in this position. The walls of the factory shifted. Not dramatically, not explosively, with the quiet mechanical precision of something that had been designed to do exactly this for years. Reinforced barriers slid away from machinery that had been waiting behind them. New production systems powered on, systems that had never appeared in any manufacturing inspection report. Within 3 minutes, the floor that had produced mining drills and excavation equipment was producing something else entirely. Railgun ammunition, drone fighter components, advanced shield generator housings. Workers moved with the efficiency of people who had rehearsed this exact transition many times, because they had. Quietly, carefully, in the years when no one was looking for anything more threatening than industrial output. Maria looked across the transformed floor. Priority 1 protocols active, she said into her communicator. All lines to defense production. No one questioned the order. They had been ready for it longer than most of them would have admitted out loud. Far above one of the outer colony worlds, a merchant vessel drifted along a standard trade corridor. Its registry identified it as a cargo transport. Medium class. Agricultural equipment in the hold. Flight path filed 3 weeks in advance. Entirely routine. The ship's captain, Elena Rodriguez, sat quietly on the bridge when the message arrived. She read it once. Then she stood. "Bridge crew," she said, with the voice of someone who had been waiting a long time to say the next part. "Prepare for configuration change." Her navigator looked up. "Captain." Rodriguez entered a command sequence into the central panel. The ship shuddered. Then it began to change. Cargo panels slid back along the hull with a sound like the entire vessel exhaling. Weapon systems unfolded from hidden compartments, slowly at first, then with increasing purpose, like something waking up. The internal cargo bay expanded outward, structural panels reconfiguring to reveal hangar bays that had been folded inside the ship's original volume with engineering that had taken a decade to perfect. Fighter craft sat in those bays. Dozens of them. What had been a medium-class cargo transport began growing heavier, stronger, deadlier. Within 4 minutes, the harmless merchant vessel had become something that appeared in no official fleet registry, because officially, it had never been a warship at all. The navigator stared at the tactical display. He had served on this ship for 2 years. "Captain, this vessel isn't in any military database." Rodriguez settled back into her command chair. "Correct," she said. "Because officially," she looked at the stars ahead of them, "this ship doesn't exist." Across human space, the quiet transformation spread like morning light, visible only if you were watching for it, invisible to anyone who wasn't. Mining operations stopped pretending to be mining operations. Asteroid stations activated weapon platforms that had spent years disguised as sensor arrays and communications relays. Civilian cargo fleets adjusted their courses toward positions that weren't on any trade map. Research facilities closed their public experiments and began activating classified projects that had been sitting in carefully maintained readiness for decades. From the outside, routine activity. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. The slow, slightly disorganized activity of a young civilization processing a difficult situation. From the inside, humanity was waking up. All of it, simultaneously, as if 50 years of quiet preparation had been waiting for exactly this moment to become real. Deep inside the moon, in a command center carved into solid rock, shielded from every scan the galactic community had ever attempted, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before a holographic display the size of a small building. The room was enormous. Dozens of officers worked at tactical stations arranged in concentric rings around the central map. None of them appeared in any galactic intelligence database. Their careers, their ranks, their entire professional existence, invisible to every alien spy network that had spent decades monitoring human military development. A tactical officer approached. Admiral, Phase 2 assets confirming activation across all 17 colony systems. Chen watched the map. Green icons were appearing around the threatened worlds. Slowly at first, then in clusters, then in streams. Hidden fleets powering up their drives for the first time in years. Stealth weapon platforms emerging from cold dormancy. Defense networks that had sat silent and patient through decades of observation by alien intelligence services, waiting for the order that had just arrived. Dominion fleet status? Chen asked. Admiral Varkesh is assembling his force. 500 warships. Estimated arrival in the new Carthage system, 18 days. Chen nodded slowly. They'll deploy in standard assault formation, she said. Heavy cruisers on the flanks. Carriers at the rear. Planetary bombardment ships forward once they've established control of the outer system. The officer looked at her. How can you be certain? Because they've used the same formation for 1,200 years, Chen said. And no one has ever made them pay for it. She tapped the console. More icons appeared on the map, the ghost fleets. The ships that had been built in the dark spaces between stars, crewed by people who had accepted careers that would never be publicly acknowledged. Ships the galaxy had never seen. Designed by engineers who had spent 20 years asking one question. What would an enemy expect us not to have? 18 days, Chen said quietly. The officer beside her waited. Time for what, Admiral? Chen looked at the display, at the 17 worlds, at the hidden fleets, at the trap that had been 50 years in the making. Time to finish setting the table, she said. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Elena Ramirez spent the next 10 days in an unbroken series of diplomatic meetings. She listened. She asked careful questions. She attended receptions and briefings and formal sessions, and she watched, with the practiced patience of someone who had learned to find information in everything, how the galactic community was interpreting events. What she found was entirely expected. Every alien delegation believed the same thing. Humanity was panicking. The evacuation was beginning. The Human Federation was making desperate diplomatic contacts, trying to find allies, trying to find leverage, trying to find anything, and finding nothing, because young civilizations never had leverage when old empires decided to act. They were watching humans very carefully. They were watching exactly what humanity wanted them to watch. Her communicator vibrated. A message from Earth. Short. Encrypted. Phase 3 ready. Elena set down her drink at the reception she was attending, a formal event hosted by the Crystalline Collective, who had recently decided that attending human social functions was an acceptable form of entertainment, and looked out at the alien city spreading beneath the building. Nexus Prime at night was genuinely beautiful. She had never stopped thinking that, even after 3 years. The towers of light, the impossible architecture, the ships moving through the upper atmosphere like slow stars. She looked at it all for a long moment. Then she went back inside. There was still work to do. 18 days later, the stars above New Carthage began to disappear. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It started with astronomers on the night side of the planet noticing unusual distortions at the edge of the system's sensor range. Gravitational ripples. Then engine signatures at extreme distance. The kind that large objects made when they were moving fast and trying not to be noticed until it was too late to matter. Then the long-range arrays confirmed what everyone had already understood. The Corthan Dominion fleet had arrived. They did not arrive quietly. 500 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect military formation, a display so precisely executed that it was clearly intended to be seen as much as to function. Their dark armored hulls caught the light of New Carthage's star like obsidian blades. The fleet spread outward across the system in calculated patterns that had been developed over 1,200 years of conquest and refined through hundreds of campaigns. Carrier vessels deployed interceptor squadrons that spread like wings across the outer system. Heavy cruisers formed shielded attack lines. Planetary bombardment ships began their slow, patient movement toward firing positions on the planet below. It was power on display. Absolute. Ancient. Certain of itself. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship Iron Judgment, High Admiral Varkesh stood with 3 of his 4 arms folded behind his back, the Corthan posture of complete tactical confidence. Report, he said. His tactical officer bowed slightly. Human presence confirmed, Admiral. A cluster of blue icons appeared on the holographic map. 6 ships. That was all. 6 small vessels in a loose patrol formation around the primary colony world. Light escorts, barely armed, circling a planet that showed no signs of any defensive preparation. Varkesh studied them. Any additional contacts? No, Admiral. No defensive installations detected. No orbital weapons platforms. No minefields. No evidence of military preparation. The Admiral allowed himself a slow, satisfied smile. As expected, 6 ships. A gesture. A symbolic protest. The kind that young civilizations made when they knew they had already lost but needed to tell their people they had tried. 6 small ships waiting in the path of 500 warships, like sparks holding their ground in front of a storm. Varkesh looked at the planet. New Carthage. Fields of gold spreading across vast continents. Civilian transports moving calmly between spaceports. From orbit, the colony looked exactly as it had in every intelligence report. Peaceful, productive, and entirely unprepared. Something very small, in a part of his mind that had kept him alive through 40 years of command, registered a question. Too quiet, it said. He dismissed it. The intelligence was solid. The math was simple. We are receiving a transmission, the communications officer reported. From the human ships? Yes, Admiral. Varkesh gestured toward the console. The transmission opened. A human voice filled the bridge. Female. Calm. Almost conversational. Corthan Dominion Fleet. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the New Carthage Defense Patrol. She paused. Welcome to our system. Several Corthan officers exchanged confused looks. This was not the voice of a defeated enemy. This was not the voice of someone facing 500 warships and trying to sound brave. This was someone who sounded like she was greeting visitors she had been expecting. Varkesh stepped toward the communications console. Human vessels. This is High Admiral Varkesh. You are ordered to stand down and prepare for boarding inspection. You are vastly outnumbered, and any resistance will be dealt with accordingly. The response came almost instantly. Yes, we noticed. A brief pause. Then a second human voice joined the channel. Different captain. Same tone. You brought quite a fleet, Admiral. I counted 500 ships. That must have taken considerable coordination. The bridge crew stared at the speakers. One of the Corthan officers muttered something under his breath. A third voice. Younger. Actually, it's 512. We ran the full count earlier. Varkesh moved to stand directly over the communications console. Human vessels, he said, his voice dropping to the register he used when he wanted people to understand he was completely serious. You have 30 seconds to surrender. There is no tactical calculation in which you survive this engagement. Rodriguez responded. Defeat you? Oh no. She sounded genuinely puzzled by the suggestion. We never planned to defeat you, Admiral. Several Corthan officers exchanged a glance. So the humans did understand their position after all. The theater was over. Good. Then Rodriguez continued. We only planned to stop you. The bridge went very quiet. That sentence made no strategic sense. 500 Dominion warships could end this battle in minutes. Even if every registered human ship was hiding somewhere in the system, and the scans showed no evidence of that. The mathematics were impossible. Varkesh turned toward his tactical officer. Prepare firing solutions on the 6 patrol vessels. The officer moved to comply. Then the display changed. Suddenly. Completely. Like the universe had rearranged itself between one breath and the next. New contacts appeared across the tactical map. Dozens. Then scores. Then hundreds. All across the system. In the asteroid fields. In the orbital lanes, in positions that had been occupied by mining stations and cargo freighters and civilian platforms for years. Except they weren't anymore. Ships that had appeared harmless moments ago were transforming. Panels sliding open along hulls that had looked like industrial equipment. Weapon systems extending from what had appeared to be sensor arrays. What had looked like a cargo freighter was becoming something with hangars. What had looked like a mining platform was becoming something with guns. The tactical officer's voice came out carefully controlled. Admiral, we are detecting a significant number of additional vessels. Human reinforcements. From where? The officer looked at his display. Then he looked again. From. He stopped. From everywhere, Admiral. The blue icons kept appearing. 100, 200, 300. Ships rising out of the asteroid belt on drives that had been cold for years. Stealth fields deactivating across the outer planets. revealing warships that had been sitting in perfect silence through every scan Dominion intelligence had conducted. The tactical display passed 400 and kept climbing. Admiral, the officer's voice was completely controlled now, with the specific control that comes from understanding that panic is not useful. Human fleet strength now exceeds our own. Varkesh stared at the map, and then he understood. The humans had known exactly where his fleet would emerge from hyperspace, exactly how it would deploy, exactly what formations it would use, because those formations were 1,200 years old and had never needed to change. They had turned the entire star system into a battlefield while his fleet was still in transit. And his 500 warships had just flown, in perfect formation, into the exact center of it. The communications channel activated. Rodriguez spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who had been waiting a long time to say the next sentence. Admiral Varkesh, I'm afraid your intelligence reports about human military capabilities were somewhat incomplete. The tactical display updated. Total human fleet strength, 417 vessels. And still climbing. A new voice joined the channel. Older, calm in a different way, not the calm of someone enjoying a moment, but the calm of someone who had been thinking about this moment for 20 years. Admiral Varkesh. This is Admiral Sarachun of the Human Defense Force. The name meant nothing to the Dominion. Their intelligence records had never contained it. Their spy networks had never detected this person. Yet the moment she spoke, every human ship in the system adjusted position. Simultaneously. Perfectly. Like a single organism that had just received a signal from its brain. Your fleet arrived exactly where we predicted, Chen said. We studied your doctrine, your preferred formation patterns, your hyperspace exit vectors, the tactical frameworks your fleet commanders train under from their first year of service. The holographic display on the Dominion bridge changed without warning, replaced by a human tactical map showing exactly what the battlefield looked like from their side. Every Dominion ship, every position, every weapon arc, every blind spot, it had been sent directly to the Dominion bridge systems. Uninvited. Impossible. Yet completely real. Chen continued. For 50 years, humanity has been learning. Every diplomatic meeting was an intelligence operation. Every trade agreement contained technology transfer clauses we studied carefully. Every cultural exchange gave us access to alien systems we spent years reverse engineering. The machine representative's voice echoed across the Dominion bridge from somewhere in the tactical display, the recording that had played in the council chamber weeks ago. Their technology base is also unimpressive. Then the human tactical officer on the channel spoke. We use Dominion plasma cannons, Admiral, modified for our hull configurations. Another human voice. Crystalline shield matrices. We improved the absorption coefficient by about 14%. A third. Machine-centered targeting systems. We integrated them with our own sensor networks. A brief pause. Rodriguez. We bought some, traded for some, reverse-engineered the rest. And then, we combined them. The Dominion bridge fell completely silent. The galaxy had believed, for 50 years, that humans were technologically behind. Still learning. Still catching up to civilizations that had been building warships when humanity was still scratching symbols into clay tablets. The truth was something entirely different. Humanity had been studying alien technology for 50 years. Not copying it. Not merely using it. Combining it. Finding the weaknesses in each system. Understanding how they were designed to work, and then asking what they could do that their designers had never thought to try. They had built something new. Chen spoke again. There's one more thing your intelligence reports missed. The battlefield map changed. Communication signals across the human fleet became visible, a web of light connecting every ship in the system. The signals were instantaneous. The Dominion communications officer whispered. That's quantum entanglement communication. That technology doesn't. He stopped. That technology shouldn't be available to a civilization this young. It wasn't, Chen said. We developed it ourselves. 14 years ago. We've been using it quietly ever since. She let that settle for a moment. Your fleet uses relay networks. Signal travel time between your flagship and your outer ships is measurable in seconds, sometimes minutes. The human fleet began moving. Hundreds of ships. Perfectly synchronized, not like a fleet following orders, but like something thinking. We move faster than your commands can travel, Chen said. Which means in any engagement, we are not just fighting your ships. We are fighting the delay between what you decide and when your fleet knows about it. Varkesh stared at the tactical display. The realization arrived not as a single thought, but as a cascade, each piece landing and revealing the next. The humans weren't stronger. They weren't older. They hadn't cheated or used some forbidden technology that violated galactic law. They had simply been paying attention. For 50 years, while the galaxy watched humanity with amusement, watching their chaotic politics, their disorganized expansion, their primitive little fleet of cargo conversions, humanity had been watching back, learning everything, preparing for everything. Rodriguez's voice was the last thing on the channel before the battle began. Admiral Varkesh, you brought 500 ships to defeat 6 patrol vessels. Her voice carried no arrogance, just the quiet weight of something true. We brought 6 patrol vessels to lure 500 ships into a trap. Admiral Chen's voice followed immediately. Now the lesson begins. The first human shot came from a mining station. The installation that Dominion Tactical Systems had labeled Industrial Extraction Platform 7 opened along its entire surface as its armor plates separated with smooth mechanical purpose. Beneath them, a rail accelerator cannon the length of a small warship extended into open space with the unhurried movement of something that had been waiting years for this exact moment. It fired once. The streak of energy crossed the system in a fraction of a second. The Dominion cruiser Vrax Dominion lost its forward shield array instantly. The follow-up shot struck its drive assembly. The ship spun slowly into open space. Not destroyed. Disabled. Spinning helplessly, crew alive, hull intact, but going nowhere. On the bridge of the Iron Judgment, alarms tore across every console simultaneously. Weapons active across the entire system. Multiple targeting locks. Defense grids online. Varkesh slammed one claw against the command panel. All ships engaged now. The Dominion fleet reacted with the discipline of a force that had executed this maneuver 10,000 times. 500 warships opened fire simultaneously. Plasma cannons, missile salvos, particle lances. The space between the two forces erupted into light. But the humans had already moved. Every human ship had shifted position in the seconds between Chen's final words and Varkesh's order, moved with the coordination of a single vast organism that knew what was coming because it had planned every response before the battle began. Their formation was not a defensive line, not an attack formation. It was something more like a web. Every ship covered the blind spots of 3 others. Every firing position interlocked with a dozen more. Dominion captains who had trained for decades found that every tactical response they attempted, every maneuver, every formation shift, every coordinated strike, was being matched and answered before the order to execute. It had even finished traveling to the outer ships. "They're predicting our movements," a Corthan officer shouted. Varkesh did not respond. He already knew. They had studied Dominion doctrine. Every formation, every standard response, every tactical option that 1,200 years of military tradition had produced. The humans had turned that entire library of knowledge into a map of the Dominion fleet's decisions, and they had built their battle plan around it. For 20 minutes, the engagement was ferocious. Dominion warships fought with everything they had. Individual captains improvised brilliantly. Crews that had served together for decades moved with practiced precision. The Dominion fleet was not inferior. It was simply fighting in a system that had been designed specifically to defeat it at every level before the first shot was fired. Then something caught the attention of Varkesh's tactical officer. "Admiral, enemy targeting patterns are..." He studied his screen. "They are specifically avoiding our reactor cores." The Admiral frowned. "Explain." "Their weapons are striking engines, shield emitters, weapon mounts, communication arrays." The officer looked up. "They are dismantling the fleet, not destroying it." Human recovery teams had appeared between disabled Dominion ships, vessels docking with crippled cruisers, stabilizing failing life support systems, treating injured crew members, securing hulls that would otherwise drift into debris fields. In the middle of a battle, in the middle of an engagement where they were outnumbered by an empire 12,000 years older than their civilization, Rodriguez's voice returned. "Admiral Varkesh, we're trying to minimize casualties." Another Dominion cruiser lost its engines. Then another. Then 3 more in rapid succession. The formation that had terrified entire civilizations for 12,000 years was coming apart, not in fire, but in pieces, being methodically, carefully, deliberately disabled. It was the most unsettling thing Varkesh had ever seen on a battlefield. He had fought enemies who were stronger. He had fought enemies who were faster. He had fought enemies who were older and wiser and better equipped. He had never fought an enemy who was winning a war while simultaneously trying to save his crew. The tactical display continued its grim count. 100 Dominion ships disabled. 200. The outer flanks had collapsed entirely, replaced by human vessels that had materialized from stealth fields beyond the system's outer planets. Entire squadrons that hadn't appeared on any scan, arriving at exactly the moment they were needed. Varkesh looked at his bridge crew. They were fighting, still fighting, with everything they had. But the battle had been decided before it began. Decided in rooms on Earth and hidden bases in asteroid fields and command centers buried under the surface of a moon, by people who had spent decades preparing for this exact engagement. The communications channel opened. Admiral Chun. Admiral Varkesh. Her voice carried no triumph, no satisfaction, just the calm certainty of someone who had known how this would end. You fought well. Your crews performed with everything that the Dominion tradition asks of them. A pause. But this battle is over. Varkesh looked at the tactical display. 240 Dominion ships, drifting powerless. Another 100 losing shields. The remaining vessels surrounded by human forces in positions that had been prepared long before the fleet arrived. Even the Iron Judgment, his flagship, the most heavily armored vessel in the Dominion fleet, had targeting locks from 17 different human weapon systems. He exhaled slowly. 12,000 years. The Dominion had never surrendered a fleet. He closed his eyes for just a moment. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw the data chart that had been displayed in the council chamber. The one that had shown a single thin blue line at the bottom of galactic military power. Official human fleet strength, 184 vessels. He understood now what that number had always been. Not a measurement, a performance. He opened his eyes and looked at his bridge crew one last time. Then he opened the fleet-wide channel. All Dominion vessels. The bridge fell silent. This is High Admiral Varkesh. He gave the order no Dominion commander had spoken in centuries. Stand down. One by one, across the star system, Dominion warships powered down their weapons. The lights on their weapons arrays dimmed. Their shields began lowering. Hundreds of ships settling into the stillness of surrender. Across the battlefield, human ships stopped firing. The silence that followed felt enormous. In less than 3 hours, before New Carthage's star had moved visibly across the sky, the largest Dominion armada deployed in a generation had been stopped cold. And now the galaxy would hear about it. 18 hours later, the Galactic Council chamber had lost any pretense of normal operation. Delegates crowded the hall in urgent clusters, speaking in every language the galaxy had produced. The news had spread at the speed of communication networks, which, for most species, meant with a delay. For humanity, it had spread instantly. 500 Dominion warships had entered the New Carthage system. 500 Dominion warships had surrendered. The concept was producing visible distress across dozens of species. The Corthan Dominion had not surrendered a fleet since before most currently living species had achieved space travel. That was not hyperbole. That was history. The kind of history that the rest of the galaxy had organized its understanding of power around. The council chamber doors opened. Ambassador Elena Ramirez walked inside. 3 weeks ago, most delegates had looked at her with amusement. Now the chamber went silent as she entered. Every eye tracked her movement. Some with fear. Some with shock that hadn't fully become another emotion yet. Some with the specific expression of beings rapidly recalculating everything they thought they understood. Her table had been moved. No longer at the back of the hall. It now sat near the center, directly beneath the council platform. Moved sometime in the last 18 hours by council staff who had not asked anyone's permission. The symbolism was precise and obvious. Chancellor Vexerin, the ancient being who had presided over the council for longer than humanity, had written language, raised one glowing hand. The chamber quieted. This emergency session is now in order. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room. High Admiral Varkesh, not standing on his bridge, not surrounded by the power of 500 warships, standing quietly, in a human medical facility on New Carthage, where he had been treated for minor injuries sustained during the battle. He looked different than he had 3 weeks ago, not defeated, not broken, but changed in a way that is specific to people who have encountered something they did not expect and have had time to understand what it means. He spoke clearly. The Dominion fleet engaged human forces in the New Carthage system. The result was a complete strategic defeat. Human forces demonstrated tactical and technological capabilities significantly exceeding our intelligence assessments. I accept full responsibility for the miscalculation and confirm that the engagement was conducted with full adherence to galactic rules of engagement on both sides. He paused. I also confirm that human forces went to significant effort to minimize casualties on both sides throughout the engagement. The ripple of shocked response through the chamber was visible. A crystalline delegate spoke. How many human ships were involved in the engagement? Varkesh answered without hesitation. Over 500. The gasps were audible. That exceeds their entire registered fleet. Elena Ramirez stood. Those records are correct, she said. The chamber turned toward her. The machine representative spoke carefully. Then explain how your species deployed over 500 warships. Elena looked around the room. At the great empires, the ancient civilizations, the newly admitted species who were watching everything with wide eyes. For 50 years, she said, humanity has maintained 2 separate military forces. The silence was complete. The first is the fleet you have been monitoring. Our official navy. The one listed in every intelligence database and council record. She paused for exactly the right length of time. The second has remained hidden until now. The chamber erupted. Accusations. Demands for explanation. Voices in dozens of languages asking the same questions simultaneously. Chancellor Vexerin raised his hand. Silence. Why, he asked. Why conceal such capability from the council? Elena activated her datapad. The holographic projection that appeared above the chamber showed the last 1,000 years of galactic history, not as a war record, but as a pattern. Young civilizations arriving in the galactic community, being assessed, being tested. Those who were strong enough to defend themselves surviving. Those who were not. The projection didn't need to finish the thought. This was the community we were joining, Elena said quietly. A system where power decides everything. Where young civilizations are expected to demonstrate weakness before they are permitted to demonstrate strength. And by the time they are permitted, it is usually too late. Her gaze moved to the Dominion delegation, then to the others. So humanity faced a choice. We could be honest about our capabilities and risk being treated as a threat before we had the standing to defend ourselves. Or we could learn first. She looked around the room. We spent 50 years learning, studying your histories, analyzing your technologies, understanding your doctrines, preparing for a moment when someone would decide to test whether we were as weak as we appeared. 3 weeks ago, that moment came. The chamber was completely quiet. A Dominion representative stood slowly. You defeated our fleet. And now what? You demand territory? Resources? A seat among the great powers? Elena shook her head. No. Then what does humanity want? The question came from a dozen directions at once. Elena's answer was simple. The same thing every other civilization in this room already has. She looked around the chamber one final time. Equality. The word landed in the silence and stayed there. For the first time since humanity had joined the Galactic Council, no one laughed. Not with amusement. Not with dismissal. Not with the comfortable certainty of power looking down at something small. For the first time, they were listening. Chancellor Vexerin leaned forward slowly. And if the council declines? Elena met his ancient gaze without hesitation. Then humanity will continue to defend itself. The chancellor held her gaze for a long moment. Then he leaned back. The council will deliberate. What followed was not the usual performance of diplomatic consultation. Delegates spoke with each other in urgent, genuine conversation. Not the theater of politics, the real kind. The kind that happens when something has changed and everyone in the room knows it and is trying to understand what it means. The Crystalline Collective was first to vote. Yes. The Machine Synod. Yes. The Ethereal Alliance. Yes. Then the Corthan Dominion. Across the chamber, Varkesh, still present via holographic link from New Carthage, looked at Elena Ramirez for a long moment. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something more like mutual recognition. One military commander to another. One civilization to another. He nodded once. The Dominion vote registered. Yes. The display completed its count. Chancellor Vexerin stood. The motion passes unanimously. The Human Federation is hereby recognized as an equal sovereign power within the Galactic Council, with all rights, protections, and responsibilities that designation carries. For a moment, the chamber was still. Then the applause began. Not polite, not diplomatic. Real, the kind that happens when something unprecedented has occurred, and even people who weren't entirely sure they wanted it to happen can recognize that it should have. Delegates across dozens of species stood, some cheering, some simply nodding with the deep sincerity of beings who understood what they had just witnessed and would not forget it. After the session ended, as the chamber slowly emptied, Varkash approached Elena. The towering admiral, 3 meters of armored certainty, who had commanded fleets across 12,000 years of Dominion history, stood before a human woman and looked at her for a long moment. Ambassador Ramirez. Admiral, I underestimated your species, he said. Significantly, at every level. Elena allowed herself the smallest possible smile. That seems to be a common mistake. Varkash looked at her for another moment. Then something happened in his expression, something that, on a human face, would have been called respect arriving in real time. Yes, he said, it will not happen again. He turned and walked toward the exit. Elena watched him go. Then she looked around the chamber, at the table near the center of the room, at the galactic community that had just voted unanimously to see humanity as it actually was, and she thought about everything it had taken to reach this moment. 50 years of patience. 50 years of being underestimated. 50 years of learning, preparing, building in the dark. Not because humanity wanted to conquer anyone. Not because they wanted to prove they were stronger, or older, or better, but because they understood something that the ancient civilizations, in all their thousands of years of history, had never needed to understand from the position humanity had occupied, that the most powerful thing in any room is the one everyone decided didn't matter. The galaxy had just learned that lesson, and it would not forget it for a very long time.